Hi everyone, Deacon Ed McCormick here again, celebrating the Ignatian year. And today I want to share with you a few thoughts on Ignatius of Loyola. Who was Ignatius of Loyola? Because Ignatian spirituality, Ignatian year makes no sense without understanding who this great man was, the founder of the Jesuits. Ignatius of Loyola was born in 1491, so a year before Columbus sailed, and he dies in 1556. He was born the youngest of many children into an aristocratic, noble Basque family, a family from northern Spain in the Basque region. And his family was very well off, one of the kind of leaders in this region. They owned lots of land, were closely connected to Ferdinand and Isabella. In fact, his sister-in-law had been a person who worked for Queen Isabella, and Queen Isabella gave her a wedding present. The lives of the saints that eventually Ignatius read. So he's born into this wealthy aristocratic family, and at about the age of 15, his father sends him from the Basque region south into the Castile to live with Velázquez de Cuellar, the treasurer, the high treasurer of King Ferdinand. And he spends his teenage years there and early adulthood, where he is treated as a family member and is basically trained in the art of the Spanish courts. He was being trained to be, in effect, a diplomat. Many people, including a lot of Jesuits, still think he was a soldier. He was never a soldier. There was no standing army at that time. Instead, he was trained in all the courtly virtues. He was trained in how to write, how to engage with wealthy people, with the monarchy. And he was caught up in the world of appearance and ambition that was all part of the Spanish court life. And at some point, Velázquez de Cuellar loses his position, he gets sick, he dies, but his wife sets up Ignatius in another position with a duke from the town of Navarre. And this duke was appointed to be the new governor of the Kingdom of Navarre. Ferdinand and Isabel were trying to unite Spain under their monarchies. Prior to them, Spain had been made up of all these little different kingdoms. And Ferdinand and Isabella engaged in a whole series of policies to unite the Spanish kingdoms under their monarchy. And so one of the kingdoms was the Kingdom of Navarre, and Ferdinand sends this duke up to Pamplona, the capital of Navarre, to take charge. And he knocks down all the local castles that were places of power. He builds his own castle in Pamplona. And Ignatius goes up there as kind of his right-hand man. At some point, while they're up there, the Portuguese start to cause trouble in the southern central part of Spain, and so Ferdinand calls up an army, and the Duke joins Ferdinand and leaves Ignatius and some of the locals in charge. And this gives the local Navarrese a chance to take back their kingdom. And so with the help of the French, they attack the castle, and Ignatius is wounded. He is wounded very badly, and eventually the French carry him back to the Loyola Manor House, where he spends 9 months convalescing. And during this time, he spends his free time reading a life of Christ and a life of the saints. And while he's doing this, he's engaged in daydreaming. And at one point, he's daydreaming about going back to the Spanish courts. He's thinking up lines he's going to use on some of the women. But then he starts to imagine himself as one of the saints that he had been reading about. Or he starts to imagine himself as one of Jesus' followers. And he starts to notice two things. The first is this. After he would imagine himself in the Spanish courts and meeting ladies, he felt himself kind of undone. He felt as if he was somehow sad and not quite himself. Whereas when he would imagine himself doing the things the saints did or following Jesus as one of his disciples, not only was he excited about it while he was imagining it, but he found that afterwards, for hours afterwards, he felt consoled. He felt a sense of peace and energy and joy and excitement. And Ignatius started to notice these different reactions. This is the beginning of what is known as discerning spirits. And he came to discover that the feelings he had after imagining himself going back to the courts and seeking this ambitious life of power was not from God. It was from the enemy. Whereas the feelings and responses that he had when he would imagine himself as one of the saints or following Jesus, he realized came from God. It was from the Spirit of God. And so he starts to discover this world inside of him in which he is attracted to one way of life and another way of life that are contrary. The other thing that starts to happen is a new set of desires start to emerge in him. He's filled with these desires to go back to the Spanish courts, retain his position, become more powerful. He's very ambitious for that. But at the same time, a new desire starts to emerge in him, a desire to follow Christ, a desire to leave his old life, a desire to be a penitent and a pilgrim. And so Ignatius eventually decides to abandon his life in the courts and become a pilgrim, heading via Barcelona over to Jerusalem to spend his life as a penitent and pilgrim. This is part one of Ignatius' story.